Hello everyone and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, July 25th and I'm your host, Nathan Solomon. Today we have a full slate of great interviews, so stay tuned. As always, I'll start with our Techstrong news recap, covering all the biggest headlines that are making waves across the tech industry. Then, we'll bring you to RSA, where Alan interviewed Amol Kulkarni. Amol is the Chief Product and Engineering Officer at CrowdStrike, and in this interview, they'll discuss DevOps culture as well as CrowdStrike's most recent product announcements. Also at RSA, Alan interviewed Teresa Lee, Head of Claims and Risk Engineering at Cowbell Cyber. In this interview, Alan and Teresa discuss the importance of cyber insurance and how Cowbell provides it to small to medium-sized businesses. We then have episode 15 of The Lab from GitLab. In this episode, Senior Developer Evangelist Brendan O'Leary welcomes Cindy Blake, Director of Product Marketing, onto the show. Brendan and Cindy talk about this month's milestone GitLab release, so be sure to tune in for that. Next, we have an interview with Mitch and Amit Shah from RSA. Amit is the Director of Product Marketing at Dynatrace. Over at Dynatrace, they simplify cloud complexity with software intelligence, and they combine automation observability, AI, and cloud-native application security into one platform. They'll be talking about the ins and outs of this platform, so you don't want to miss out. Then, Mitch talks with Einat Or, CEO and co-founder of Treeverse. In this discussion, they talk about how Lake FS brings data into the world of DevOps and software engineering. To cap off the show, we have two editions of View of Vizard. In the first, Mike talks to Alexis Richardson, the CEO of Weaveworks. In this discussion, they describe the current state of GitOps in the age of cloud-native applications. In the second interview, Mike sits down with Paul Caiazzo from Avertium, and they dive into the cybersecurity conflict between Russia and Ukraine and how it's impacting the average organization. That's what we have coming up for you here on Techstrong TV. Let's get the show started. Enjoy.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Today is July 25th, and here are the headlines. First in news, a heatwave forced Google and Oracle to shut down their computers. As record temperatures hit much of the UK, the tech giants suffered outages as cooling systems failed at London data centers. Oracle reported that 2 cooler units in the data center experienced failure, causing temperatures to rise and eventually shutting down the systems. Separately, overheating also affected a Google Cloud data center in London. In order to prevent damages to the machines, Google powered down some of the computers. Although the outages were unexpected, heatwaves are expected to persist, so it'll be interesting to see how the measures companies like Google and Oracle will take to combat the issue going forward. Another tech titan making headlines is Apple, as it agreed to pay a $50 million settlement on a class action lawsuit. The settlement is over Butterfly keyboards, a component of some MacBook laptops that frustrated users across the world with typing failures. The Butterfly keyboard was designed to provide innovative typing precision, but many customers complained that characters were repeated when pressed or didn't show up on their screens at all. In the lawsuit, customers claimed that Apple knew about the defect since they were offered free repairs on the defective keyboards back in 2018. Apple was offered to pay anywhere from $50 to $395 to affecting customers. Customers will be sorted into 3 groups depending on the scale of repairs, their devices received at the time, and this will determine how much money each customer gets. With about 15 million computers involved, the issue is massive. Another huge lawsuit in today's headlines is Amazon, as it is taking legal action against the administrators of more than 10,000 Facebook groups. Amazon claims these Facebook groups are generating fake reviews on Amazon marketplaces in the US, UK, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and Japan. In exchange for money or free goods, reviews are being posted on Amazon, throwing off buyers and giving sellers unearned good reputations. One of the groups, called Amazon Product Review, which was removed earlier this year by Facebook, had a whopping 43,000 members. Boosting products with a large number of positive reviews can increase sellers' visibility on Amazon and place them higher up on search engine results. The legal action has been filed at a court in Washington, King County, near Amazon's Seattle headquarters, so we'll see how this dispute plays out. In other news, Facebook is launching a new feature that lets users see posts in reverse chronological order. The feature called Feeds is a tab in the app allowing users to see all the most recent posts from their friends. It is one of the most requested features, and it is set to roll out globally over the next week. Although it's only going to be released on mobile at first, the desktop version will be available in the next few weeks. Many believe the move is an attempt at returning to its roots, as it started as a feed more focused on friends and family in its early years. The move by Meta follows up on a similar move it made on its other platform, Instagram, where it also brought back the chronological feature. Next, China has fined the ride-hailing giant Didi the equivalent of $1.2 billion for breaking its cybersecurity laws. The Cyberspace Administration of China said that it found conclusive evidence against the company after it launched an investigation just days after the firm launched its shares in the US last year. In the investigation, the CAC found that Didi illegally collected 12 million pieces of screenshot information from users' mobile photo albums and excessively accumulated 107 million pieces of facial recognition info, among other violations. The CAC also announced that it had imposed fines of 1 million yuan each on Didi Global's chairman and chief executive. Since the fines were imposed, Didi has stopped trading on the New York Stock Exchange. In response, Didi accepted the ruling and said it would conduct comprehensive and in-depth self-examination. On Security Boulevard, we have an article talking about how Radware employs blockchain technologies to thwart bots. In this article, our very own Mike Vizard discusses Radware adding blockchain technologies to its bot manager platform. He weighs the benefits and drawbacks of such a move, as well as how blockchain could potentially be used going forward in a similar context. On Digital CXO, we have an article covering what CIOs need to know about graph databases. For one, the article discusses the importance of graph databases as a general-purpose technology and how they can be well-suited for storing the relationships between users. It also talks about some powerful techniques for extracting insights from graphs via unsupervised algorithms, so be sure to check that out on Digital CXO. Finally, on Container Journal, we have an article talking about how 1 billion Flux downloads shows that GitOps is gaining ground. The article cites Weaveworks, which said container images of its open-source Flux version control software have now been downloaded over 1 billion times. The article dives into the significance of this milestone, as well as what it means for GitOps, so be sure to check that out on Container Journal. And that's what we have for you today on our Techstrong News Recap.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live. This is day 4, our last day of live coverage at RSA Conference. It's nice and quiet. It's early in the morning here. It's only about 9 o'clock. And the crowds that came in are already in. And so here in Moscone West, it's probably one of the quietest times we've had all week.
Fantastic.
Which makes for great live broadcasting. Let me introduce you to our guest for this segment. His name is Amol Kulkarni.
That's correct.
Is that
you
good?
got it right.
All right. Amol, first of all, welcome and thanks for joining us. I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself. What is your title and responsibilities? You're with, I should mention, Amol is with CrowdStrike. What do you do at CrowdStrike?
Great to be here, Alan. I am the Chief Product and Engineering Officer at CrowdStrike. So I run product management, defining the vision, the roadmap for our technology, where we are going. And then, of course, I also have engineering to deliver on that. So it's define as well as deliver. It's end-to-end ownership.
Yeah. And, we were talking a little off camera. I'm Digital CXO, our newest community and brand that we've been developing, is really a testament to this kind of new way of thinking.
That's true.
At the at the upper echelons, this C-level.
That's right.
And so the idea of having a C-level person who not only defines the product, but then actually leads the team building the product.
That's right.
You know what? 5-10 years ago, that was unheard of.
That was not common. Yeah.
Very not common.
Yeah.
But today we're seeing this more and more.
Yeah.
The chief product officer is also the chief technology officer, or the chief engineering guy is also the CTO.
Right.
The CIO sometimes is also the chief information security officer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It is it's very different. Digital transformation, I think, is
pushing that out. I mean, I think the way to think about it is we work with a full DevOps mindset, and to me, DevOps is a culture,
right?
Where it's all about that end-to-end ownership. So even within engineering, we say the engineers have to own it from defining the how, the design, all the way to implementation, and also supporting it in production. Right? Yeah. So we don't have a separate operations team, for example. That's by design, because we embrace DevOps as a culture. And I think this merging of roles is in a similar vein, right? So someone who is defining the product should also be do it in a grounded way to say, okay, what is possible.
Right.
A lot of those like the tussles, the conflicts that used to be there go away because of that. Because
absolutely.
And you have to be balanced on both sides.
I mean, I'm thinking back to my own experience before Techstrong. I was involved in several venture-backed startups,
right?
And now that you say you're doing it, it just like a light bulb. It makes perfect sense,
right?
Because we would have a product team, and I was involved, in product,
right?
And we had a vision for what the feature looked like. This is before DevOps. We're doing a release twice a year.
Yeah.
So we had a vision of what this feature would be and what that feature would be. And then we give that to the engineering team. And, they'd come back to us with some prototypes or MVP or whatever you want to call them back then.
Right.
And that's not what we were thinking.
No, right, exactly.
That's
exactly.
Not what
so
we
you
meant.
have to iterate and exactly. So
and so doing it, having one person own both of that, it's now that I think about it, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it works for some organizations. I mean, I wouldn't say it's
you're right.
It's like it's not a solution for everyone. That's right.
But I think it's a forward way of looking at it.
Right.
Let's talk about CrowdStrike, though. You guys have had several product announcements during the week here at RSA.
Yep.
Why not, if you don't mind, share with our audience?
Absolutely. So super excited to talk about all of the announcements we made at RSA this week. The biggest one, I'll start with that, which to me is very exciting because it's a fundamental piece of technology that we're building. It's called CrowdStrike Asset Graph. What Asset Graph does is gives organizations a 360-degree view into all of their IT assets, their cloud assets, their mobile assets, their IoT assets, so all assets, but not just assets, also the configurations on those assets, the users and identities in their organizations.
Really? Okay.
And applications that are running deployed on those. But going even beyond that, it's also looking at relationships between all of those entities. So which users are logging on to which hosts, which applications are deployed on which hosts, are being used by which users. All of that as a holistic graph database. It is the first time that this is being done as a large-scale graph database with all of the relationships being incorporated in a truly schematized manner.
Absolutely.
So that's super exciting because I think it enables a lot of different scenarios. And the first one we are starting off with is our product Falcon Discover, which gives users the understanding of which hosts are managed meaning they have CrowdStrike Falcon sensor on them, which hosts are unmanaged, what applications are deployed, which versions do they have, which users have what kind of privileges, sort of giving you just a understanding, a visibility into your landscape. That to me is the biggest problem we have today, right?
Well, you're talking about fundamental security issues here, right?
That's right.
So number one is you can't defend what you don't know you have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Number two, look, I've been in this business for 25 years, right? You remember Big Fix?
Right.
IBM bought them
That's right.
10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
That was the whole Big Fix model, right? Is we can't fix, you got to know what you have.
You have to know
we
what you
can-
have.
We
Absolutely.
can fix it.
Absolutely.
They didn't, and maybe I'm not blaming them, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but we didn't have the technology then to go to the depth.
That's right.
That
That's
you're
right.
going
I mean,
to
graph
now.
databases didn't exist. Like that's new, right?
I mean, we could tell what IP address and what that device said it was from
Right.
that IP address.
That's right. That's right.
Applications, users, these kinds. We just didn't have.
That's
we
right.
didn't have that kind of information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number two, though, is the ability, like you said, manage devices, meaning there's some sort of agent, whether
Right.
you want to call it an agentless agent or an agent.
That's right.
There's something on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But what we've seen is now the ability to do it on unmanaged devices.
Exactly.
Because again, it's easy to know what you have when you already have an agent on them.
That's right. That's right.
Chances are the ones we don't know are the ones that don't have that agent.
And that's a major problem for
Sure
just
is.
even for compliance. Like,
Yeah.
what coverage do I have? Do I have 100% coverage with the security tools that I'm supposed to be deploying?
Absolutely.
And in this remote first world, there are resources all over the place, right? That are popping up.
Yeah.
That are part of the enterprise, but they are invisible to a large extent. Plus, shadow IT is a big thing. So all of those, like doing that sort of real-time updated 360-degree view into your assets and into your enterprise was a big hard problem. And one of the key things we solved within that is a problem of entity resolution, which is multiple data sources tell you about something, right? They may be telling you about, let's say, this computer, or another data source may be telling you some bits about the same computer, or could be about a different one. And how do you know if they're talking about two different things or two same things? Like one of the customers we were talking to was saying, hey, I have the same host name, the same IP address for two different computers on two different subnets, right? And we have to disambiguate that. So that's a hard problem of entity resolution that we've solved with this.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. We've got two more.
Yeah, two more. So the other one is we CrowdStrike recently acquired a company called Humio,
Yes.
which is an index-free, schema-aware but schema-free data store, infinitely scalable, live search. And what we're doing as part of this announcement is to connect CrowdStrike Falcon with Humio
Yes.
through Humio for Falcon. So that enables Falcon data to be seamlessly moved over into Humio, enables long-term retention in Humio for users to do their compliance requirements, their auditing requirements.
Love it.
As well as retrospective hunting and forensics, right?
Yep.
So something happened, Falcon detected it, prevented it, mitigated it, but now 6 months later, you want to say, hey, what exactly happened? When did they come in? All of that you can do with Humio, with that infinite fast search that we are making available. So that's the second announcement.
Excellent.
Right.
Actually, I think I've done an interview with someone from CrowdStrike
From
Humio.
on Humio.
Humio/CrowdStrike on
Right.
that.
That's right.
But that again, we didn't have that capability,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And now we do.
Yeah.
Last one.
Yeah. So the last one is around Falcon XDR. So XDR, as you obviously know, there's a lot of buzz around it, and lot of
Almost as much as zero trust.
as
but
much as
go
zero
ahead.
trust. That's right. But we've been focused on making sure that XDR adds true value to customers, and as part of that, what we've done is integrated XDR, implemented the response part of XDR using Falcon Fusion, our SOAR framework that's built into the Falcon platform. So we've given it part of platform, not as a separate SKU. No one has to purchase it. You have it available as soon as you are a Falcon customer. And XDR is deeply integrating with that, leveraging it for all the response capabilities. And the second part is the XDR value is in the ecosystem. Which partners are part of it? How are you doing detections across multiple domains, multiple technologies, starting from EDR, but extending it out to all of the other domains. And As part of that, this week we announced addition of 3 additional partners: Mendo Security
Oh, sure.
for web and browsing,
Yep.
Vectra AI for
Know them
NDR,
well. Yep.
and Ping Identity for
Identity and access.
So
Beautiful.
all of these areas already have existing partners, and we continue to add new partners to deepen it, and more importantly, cover the technologies that our customers have deployed.
Those are also in each of their areas. These are leading companies.
That's right.
Real quality stuff there.
Yeah.
So this is. I sit here, I observe.
Right.
I don't have to sell product, build product.
That's right.
I look at all the XDR buzz here.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if a lot of people have really got their XDR story right. Right?
I think there's if you ask multiple people, you'll get multiple answers on what XDR even is. Right?
Well, this always happens at RSA, right?
Right.
Because you get a buzz and everyone's running with it.
That's right.
And it becomes extend. Remember, Microsoft used to use that term. We're going to extend it. Right?
Yes.
And
that's right.
Extension means a lot of different things.
That's right. Yeah. We've been trying to be very, very crisp and clear on our XDR definition.
Yeah.
And really the key focus is to find detections, find alerts that one single domain would not have found.
Right.
So take weak signals from multiple different areas, from email security, from web security, from endpoint, from CASB. But because those weak signals are happening within a short window and they are correlated, you can say, oh, there is something really malicious going on here, even though each of those individually would not alert you.
Right.
So that's kind of the idea.
So it's a little more mature than some of the stuff I've seen running around here.
I hope so, yes.
Yeah, so that's good. So it sounds like you guys haven't been too busy then.
We are not too busy, yes.
What about impressions of RSA this week?
RSA has been fantastic. I think biggest thing I would say is people have been super excited about meeting everyone in person. This is 2 years, 2+ years. We were here in March 2020, and towards the end of it, like, people were not shaking hands; they were fist bumping, right? As the pandemic was starting, and now it's fantastic to see everyone here. So I was honestly pleasantly surprised with the traffic and the buzz, and that energy is fantastic.
Keep in mind, it's still half of what it was.
It is still half of
2019.
That's right.
But even half of RSA is a lot
huge.
more than any place. Exactly. So good stuff.
So I think that's great. And then, obviously we've had a lot of announcements. Other companies continue to do that. So there is a lot of momentum.
There's always stuff going on.
That's right.
In the cyber world. And traditionally RSA and then maybe Black Hat this summer is the place where it all kind of comes together and we see it in mass.
That's
but anyway, Amal, thank you
very
so
much, Alan,
for being on our show.
I appreciate it.
Hey, we're live here at RSA. It's still quiet, but there's people on the escalators we see. We're going to be live here all day, wrapping up our coverage. We hope to see you back on. We'll be on in just a few moments.
This is Techstrong TV.
All right. We're live back here again at Cyber World here at RSA 2022. We're in Moscone West. We had the usual someone here from San Francisco on a loudspeaker cursing outside. They've removed that person. Otherwise, it's actually pretty quiet here right now. I think a lot of people are in sessions or maybe down on the expo floor. I want to introduce you to my guest, Teresa Lee. Yes. She's with Cowbell. Who is Cowbell, you ask? Well, let's ask Teresa.
Thanks, Alan. My name is Teresa Lee. I'm the head of claims and risk engineering at Cowbell. And we are a cyber insurer for small to medium-sized businesses. So cyber coverage for businesses that have, that need cyber coverage. And in today's environment, it's increasingly becoming a contract provision. What business does not have an internet-facing presence, customer data? So it's small to medium-sized businesses are in great need of cyber insurance.
All businesses are in great
Yes,
need of cyber insurance,
sure.
but certainly
There's an
the
underserved-
SMB
yeah,
is
an
an
underserved.
underserved market. So, look, we were talking, Teresa and I were talking off camera, right? And I don't know about you out there, but if any of you have, got own companies, operate companies, help operate companies, we get cyber insurance offered to us as part of our general liability coverage. Our broker says, should we put a rider on for cyber? And I will tell you, and full disclosure, Teresa, in front of you, up until maybe 2 years ago, the advice from the insurance broker is, look, we're going to offer it to you, but we don't really see a lot of value because A, of the cost, B, what it actually covers, etc. Now, the rise of ransomware,
Yes.
I think, has changed that game, right? And so now they're telling you, yeah, maybe you should get it. But at the same time, they caution you, read your policy to understand what is covered in ransomware, right? Well, what is covered in ransomware insurance?
Yes.
We know what ransomware does.
Yeah, that's right.
But so, because a lot of people, unfortunately, and this is, I guess, your life these days, right? A lot of people pay for insurance, think they have coverage, and then, boom, an incident happens. They don't know how to deal with that. And they either, like, one of three things happens. Either they find out the coverage they thought they had really doesn't cover what they had. B, they kind of voided their policy or voided their coverage because the way they responded was just totally wrong. They didn't notify, they used outside vendors, whatever. And any coverage they did have, any benefits they had, they lost. Or three, they actually get covered, right?
Yeah.
And they would make a successful claim. I don't even want to guess what the different percentages are. But this is your life.
Yeah, no, it's,
how does it work?
and there's been such a development in cyber insurance in the last 2 years. And a lot of that is driven by the proliferation, frequency, and severity of ransomware.
Yep.
And it's targeting not just the Fortune 500 companies, it's the whole swath.
Everyone.
And that's why companies do need, small to medium sized, do need this coverage to protect them, because they may not make it through a cyber event otherwise, because these are very expensive. And so my life every day is when a claim comes, when it arises. So this means a policyholder has had a hacking incident, a ransomware. Maybe they miswired money because they were a victim of social engineering, a phishing incident.
Yep.
And so it's not lost on me that when I get that call, when I get that email from a policyholder, from a broker saying, oh my gosh, something's happened, but we can't operate. Our systems are down. Our email is gobbledygook. It's not lost to me that that's probably the worst professional day for them. It's really alarming. It's very stressful, and they don't know what to do. The first thing always, if you have a cyber policy, is to notify your cyber insurer. It should be the first thing for a couple of good reasons. First of all, we do this every day. While it's your worst day and your worst case scenario, for us on the cyber insurance side, this is the product at work. This is why we're here. This is our everyday scenario. So we know what to do, and we'll help you. And part of that is right away, we'll get the resources that you'll need depending on the incident. So if it's a ransomware, we'll triage that. We'll see what kind of threat actor group it is, how your operations are, what kind of cyber architecture you have. And we'll get the forensics as well as the breach counsel in right away to triage and to help guide the next steps. We have preferred vendor panels. So you spoke about, do I Google who's going to help me with a ransomware negotiation? No, don't do that. Tell your cyber insurer, we have experts on hand, ransom negotiators. We have forensic investigation. We have PR firms. This is all part of the coverage by and large. We have recovery experts that can help you get up and running, operational. And we do want to mitigate the exposure. And some of that is quick reaction, the right
and also
resource.
experience in the area, right? Because a lot of people, the first time when they get ransomware, just the first time.
It's very shocking.
Right?
It feels very vulnerable.
It absolutely
you think you're going to that's the last day of your
real
business.
Violation, absolutely.
Exactly.
And here's the thing, in listening to you, Teresa, I want to emphasize this to our audience. When you have life insurance, they don't bring the dead person back to life.
No.
They write you a check. That's what life insurance is. You die, your loved ones, your beneficiaries, whoever, they get a check.
Yeah.
When you have car insurance, someone sues you, your liability insurance defends and covers you. You get damage to your car, your insurance company writes you a check to fix the car. Sometimes they'll actually bring you to their own body shop or approved body shop to do the work to make sure it's done well. When we're talking about cyber insurance, it's not just writing a check.
No.
Right? Because I can't write a check for your business going out of business. It is truly about helping you.
It's about all the
Recover.
resources. Yes.
Right.
Yes. And those are the goals. We want the business to recover. And so that might be, in some instances, paying the extortion so that the business avoids a big business interruption.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
So I know for a while, policy by FBI and CISA and everything was never pay the ransom because that's like negotiating with terrorists. Are you saying that sometimes you do recommend that they pay the ransom?
Yeah. Well, we don't pay the terrorists. So there is OFAC does provide a list of entities that we would not support a ransom payment to. And so if there is an extortion payment to be made, and there's a whole set of factors to evaluate before you get to that point. But throughout that process, we run it through the traps so that we are not paying a sanctioned entity, and the insured is not paying, and we're not supporting any of that. So right now, if an entity is on that OFAC sanctioned list, we would not participate in that transaction. The insured wouldn't. And so there is cyber extortion coverage by and large on these cyber policies. And it's not illegal to pay an extortion payment right now, barring what I just said.
Yeah, I get it.
So until the government, really intervenes in a stronger way.
Well, you got to do what's best for your client. I mean,
it's an evaluation of the factors. Yes.
Absolutely. But I want to reemphasize this. When you're taking cyber insurance, you're hiring an expert that if and when you are the victim, you've got some real expertise to help you recover, whether it's recovering your data, paying a ransom, getting your business up and running as quickly as possible. This isn't just, I buy insurance and they write a check.
No, that's right. And even more importantly now, cyber insurance is not just pay the premium, have your piece of paper, let's hope, cross fingers that nobody, gets a claim. It's a continuous process. And by that, I mean, the threat landscape is shifting in cyber. So if it's a different type of insurance, you know what the risk is. It's death, it's damage to your vehicle. In cyber, there are vulnerabilities out in the wild. The threat actors are shifting every day. And so what might have been a threat 6 months ago, today might completely look different. You're exposed in a completely different way than when you turned in your application. And so very important with that and how we can address and mitigate exposure is to keep our eye on that threat landscape. And then if there's something out in the wild, if there's a vulnerability, if a threat actor group is focused on an industry, if there's something there, then we as cyber insurers, and particularly at Cowbell, are proactive in informing our policyholders. Look, we've noticed your industry is being targeted. We notice a vulnerability in your software and that you haven't patched it. So it's a proactive engagement. And we have risk engineers at Cowbell who are watching what's going out in the wild. We learn from our claims. So if I see a bunch of claims targeting, a threat actor group targeting a particular scope of our policyholders, we're going to contact them and proactively help them be more resilient. And so that's a different approach to insurance than maybe some other lines. And it really is effective, and it has to be this way because, like I said, the threats are changing. We have to keep up. We have to keep up.
Well, and that's just unfortunately the nature of this security game. It's a cat and mouse. I'm going to ask, and you may not know the answer to this because I realize you're on the claim side of the house, but for the typical small to medium business, what does cyber insurance cost?
Well,
You have a
yeah. Well,
rule of thumb.
it depends, and the market is changing. It's pretty dynamic right now, and so it would depend on a few factors. And so I'll outline some of those
Okay.
factors, but it depends on their cybersecurity posture, right? So if you're just like in anything else where you're trying to buy insurance, what is your exposure? How are you protected? What's your level of cybersecurity? If you have better controls in place, you're probably going to get a better rate, right? Because you're more resilient. You're going to be able to mitigate claims. And so we look at those factors. You have multi-factor authentication. Do you have viable backups? So if you're hit with ransomware, you don't have to pay for decryptor because you can restore from viable backups that are offline and tested. Do you have an incident response plan? All these things will make you a more attractive potential insured.
Yep.
So you know what to do when something happens. Do you have best practices in place? Do you care about cybersecurity? Do you train your employees so they are aware? Phishing emails are a great way, a very common way, and it's a human element.
Smishing as well. We've been getting a lot of
there's
those.
the text messages. It's a proliferation of anything that can have a human kind of vulnerability too. So we have software vulnerabilities and we have humans, and so we do need to take care of that, and that's through training, through education. And so if an organization cares and is educating its workforce, then that can prevent a lot too. Segregation of systems. So if one part of the house is impacted, maybe it won't spread to the rest of it. And so all of these are taken into consideration, as well as what kind of data the organization might have. So as we know, the threat actors can trying to monetize. And so if they see an organization with the kind of juicy data that no one's watching, it's not being protected, and they can resell that, or that's a pressure. Yeah, it's a pressure point, right? So if they say, "Oh, we've taken your data in a ransomware transaction," that's going to be the pressure point for an organization to not be shamed and like, "Oh no, our business partners are going to know we didn't look after their data." So it's all, it's a group of factors that are in that evaluation of what an organization might pay. But for sure, it's becoming more expensive. The market is harder. There's more claims that are being paid, of course, and so part of that is driving the pricing. But also, I think part of it is that maybe I've heard comments that cyber insurance may be more difficult to get because of these maybe subjectivities or things that we as an insurer feel more comfortable if a policyholder has or cares about.
So that to me, though, is the difference between dealing with enterprise and small medium. Enterprises will have incident response plans and teams. Enterprises will have contingencies. Enterprises have really thought about this. A lot of small to medium companies, the biggest hurdle is doing the paperwork around it, right? I don't have an incident response. Can you give me a vanilla one? I'll just put my name on it. I don't have, do we have two-factor authentication? Oh, no.
How do I get what?
That. Well, no, they make it easy to do, whether you're using a Google Gmail or Microsoft or many apps. You could install it. Your employees are going to yell bloody murder because they hate doing it. But nevertheless, it's an important part of, we just did it with our Google accounts, for instance, because we use, Google Suite backend.
Yeah.
We put 2FA in across the board. Our employees push back. Why do I have to do this? Well, because we said so. I'm sorry. What do you want me to say?
Well, it is a hassle. Some of this is a hassle, but what's more of a hassle? When your business goes down.
Exactly.
When you can't operate. Well, you can't access email at all.
Absolutely. And this is, that's the alternative.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know what we didn't tell people? Cowbell, where do they go to find out more?
Oh, so we have a website. I'll give it to you. But then also, I just did want to say that with Cowbell, we have those incident response plans. We have risk engineers to help the small to medium size because we are very aware that that resources are limited in this segment of the market, and they just haven't had the opportunity to kind of really make a robust team. And so we will help with all those resources with no extra charge because it does make them a more resilient insured. Cowbell Cyber AI. Yeah. Thank you.
Cowbellcyber.ai. All right.
Thank you
Teresa,
so
thank
much.
you so much. Hey, if you haven't got cyber insurance for your company, go check out cowbellcyber.ai. Its time has come. We're going to be back in a minute. I think our next guest is from our friends at Orca, and we'll be talking a little cloud native security here back in a moment.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to The Lab, a monthly show where we look at the latest and greatest developments in software development, DevOps, and the cloud. I'm your host, Brendan O'Leary, and I'm coming to you from a very warm Annapolis, Maryland. We're in the middle of the summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, and we're feeling it on the East Coast of the United States. And for those who don't know me, I'm a developer evangelist at GitLab, which means that I get to talk to amazing folks throughout the software engineering space about what it really means to get code shipped into production. And today, as always, we'll be covering the latest GitLab release, GitLab 15.1. That's our kind of first iteration into the version 15.0 series that is bringing new cutting-edge DevOps capabilities to GitLab's One DevOps platform. And we got exciting product updates that will help lots of users and help developers collaborate and deliver software more securely. We're going to talk about some of my favorites today. We're going to dive into some updates around SAML group sync and Salsa level 2 build artifact attestation, some links to included CI/CD configuration, and enhanced visibility into your value stream with some DORA metrics, and much more. And also today, to talk specifically about some of the security features and other things coming in the GitLab 15.0 series, I have a special guest, Sydney Blake, my good friend, Director in Product and Solutions Marketing, who's joined us to discuss some of the latest features in GitLab, as well as some takeaways from the GitLab 15 launch event that we had this past month, and a little sneak peek of some of the things to come. But first, we'll dive into GitLab 15.1. As I normally say, this is the best release ever. If you want to get more details around the release, be sure to check out the blog post. If you Google GitLab 15.1, it'll be the first result. But there's a couple that I wanted to highlight specifically. First is SAML group sync for self-managed GitLab instances. So for a while, we've had the ability to sync groups from LDAP, but this also brings it for SAML-based providers so that you can map the group identity in your identity provider to a self-managed GitLab group through SAML group links. So previously, this was only available on GitLab.com where we had SAML authorization, but now you can do it for self-managed instances as well. And those group memberships are then updated whenever a user logs into GitLab through that SAML provider. That way you can match the permissions and groups that someone should have access to with GitLab permissions and groups. And so this new functionality will really decrease the workload for a GitLab administrator to have to continue to tweak someone's permissions, and also reduces onboarding time for group members into GitLab's offering and into the One DevOps platform, because now that kind of those permissions that they should have access to are automatically granted to them when they log in through SAML. Another big improvement in 15.1 is around the visibility into value stream and our DORA metrics. So you've heard me talk about the 4 DORA metrics before. We've added all 4 of those into GitLab so that you can see them. right in the value stream analytics dashboard as 4 tiles that show you each of those DORA metrics for your group. You can now track that team's performance and see how that value flow from ideation to customer delivery is either improving or not improving over time. And the way you can do that is a new trend chart for the DORA time to restore service metric. That gives you insights into the stability of your software and how is reliability trending over time, and shows information about how long it takes your organization to recover from a failure that does happen in production. And this is the third DORA chart that's now available out of the box right in GitLab. And we're going to continue to improve the visibility into the DORA metrics and trending by adding charts for the 4th metric, change failure rate, in coming releases. And those 4 DORA metrics, if you don't remember, I've talked about them a lot before, but they're deployment frequency, lead time for changes, mean time to restore the service, and change failure rate. Those are ones that have been shown through data and years of research to directly tie to an organization's DevOps adoption and how they're able to impact their business in a positive way with DevOps. And so that's going to be part of our value stream analytics dashboard. And you can go find those right now in GitLab 15.1. Another great feature in GitLab 15.1 is this link to any included CI/CD configuration right from within the pipeline editor. So as you may remember, the pipeline editor shows you kind of visually how you're creating a pipeline. And now, if you're bringing in configuration from an external source, right? Maybe you're starting from the configuration that is published for your group and gives you access to some jobs that are written by another team. You can now see how that works together and link right into all the included configuration files and any templates you're using right from the pipeline editor. That way you can view that configuration and how that impacts your pipeline, which is going to make it a lot easier for folks that manage large or complex pipelines that might bring in templates or configuration files from other sources. And the next thing I wanted to talk about is, GitLab 15 coming with Salsa to attestation included for build artifacts. And that's why I have my friend Sydney here to talk about it. Sydney, could you tell us a little bit about, kind of what Salsa is for those who haven't heard about it? I mean, most people have heard of Salsa, but in this context, and then kind of how that interacts with GitLab.
Sure. I live in Texas, and salsa is like, that's what we wean babies on salsa. So salsa in this context, though, stands for supply chain levels for software artifacts. It's a mouthful. That's why it's got the acronym. It's a security framework that helps ensure that the security and integrity of your software supply chain. So it's a checklist of standards and controls meant to prevent tampering, to improve integrity, and to secure packages and infrastructure in your projects, your businesses, your enterprises. And by default, GitLab Runner is now capable of generating and producing SALSA 2 compliant attestation metadata. It's a mouthful, the metadata for build artifacts. If the artifact is stored in the registry, then the attestation metadata is stored alongside the artifact in that registry. So otherwise, the metadata is rendered in plain text in a JSON file, and that's stored with the artifact. The new attestation information can help you more easily verify that your build artifacts have not been tampered with. We've also added other improvements and updates like enhancements to our security scanners, new API details about who added members, improved insights into value stream analytics, a new GitLab Runner, and so much more. I would encourage your listeners to take a look at the 30 or so updates that were included in the release post.
So many new updates, it's hard to keep track of. It's hard to pick your favorites, right? And because of that, Sydney, I want you to talk about a little our GitLab 15 launch event. I actually didn't get to see it. I was on site for a conference, but you were a speaker there at that kickoff. Can you, give us your takeaways from that event and how it went?
Yeah, absolutely. GitLab's really taking DIY DevOps head on, and it's extending the one DevOps platform to enable organizations to thrive in their ability to create and deliver software. Many companies are piecing together DevOps solutions. We tend to refer to it as DIY, do-it-yourself DevOps. it's time consuming and it's resource intensive. It's kind of like building with duct tape, and then you still have to maintain that continuously. So you end up spending more of your time maintaining the tool chain than on delivering the software to the business. The updates that we have in 15. So what we're doing philosophically is we're saying, okay, yes, we continue to release product on the 22nd of every month, but we're going to package some things together into a product launch or marketing release that allows us to talk about things that kind of cross releases. We do MVC, so oftentimes there's small incremental pieces that kind of get lost in the noise, and so this GitLab 15, that launch, just enabled us to kind of bring things together into a theme and talk about them. But we have really focused on providing an alternative to DIY DevOps that allows companies to achieve technical efficiencies and drive business results with one DevOps platform. We had Gene Kim come and speak. We have the entire virtual event available for replay. I think you'll get the link. But Gene Kim was able to share with us his findings and advice for accelerating DevOps. He had some highlights from his most recent book, The Unicorn Project. You may recall his first book was The Phoenix Project. And he used a story to explain the benefits of DevOps, and sort of a before and after case study, if you will. He also was kind of the founder of Dora metrics, so he was really thrilled to see us roll out all 4 of those. The other thing that we had was David DeSanto, our head of product, covered some exciting things that are coming throughout GitLab 15. And some of the main themes were visibility and observability due to the acquisition of OpsTrace, or in conjunction with that, continuous security and compliance, data science teams and workloads. So just like, we originally started for developers and then we added designers as users and personas, we're adding data science teams so that we want GitLab to be inclusive, where truly everyone can contribute and collaborate regardless of their role in software development. Also, some improvements around enterprise planning and workflow automation. And finally, we had a guest speaker, come and talk about the GitLab's certification. We're calling it a level up program, where you can be certified in certain DevOps skills, and that will help your professional career as you use DevOps.
That's really great. Yeah, and there's some fantastic speakers, yourself, of course, Dave DeSanto, always great to hear from. I'm definitely going to rewatch it because Gene Kim is like one of my idols. I love to hear him speak. His books are always the ones I first recommend to people when they're like, what is this DevOps thing that I hear you talking about, or is written 3 times on your shirt, Brendan? And so that's great to hear. Gene talk about his views on DevOps is always a valuable use of time. And then, like you said, it allowed us to really talk about where we've seen the industry in the past, a few years that we've been, again, releasing every month on the 22nd, but kind of take a step back and say, okay, what does that mean? And why, where have we come and where are we going? So that's a really exciting event. And hopefully folks will take a look at that. That it's worth the price of admission, which is nothing. It's free. So definitely take a look at that. Sydney, while I have you here though, a question I like to ask folks when they come is, is there anything that our users or that you in particular are looking forward to, or things that have got you excited about what's coming, in the GitLab 15 series?
Security and compliance are my favorite topics. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention those. And we're going to be doing some things in the fall that tie into this that your listeners will want to participate in as well, I'm sure. Software supply chain security is super important. It was a big topic at RSA this year, which is a big security conference, but a lot of people didn't go into any depth about what that means. And we are really digging in to give a very robust solution there. But software bill of materials is sort of the first thing that people tend to gravitate to. It was brought out by President Biden in his executive order on cybersecurity that software bill of materials, or SBOM as it's referred to, is sort of like understanding the ingredients list that's in the food that you eat, and being able to know what software is included in your application, because oftentimes it's not just your software. In fact, increasingly so, it includes dependencies. So we offer a dependency list already. We'll be adding some things to that to help with attestation, to make sure that it would be tamper evident. The other thing is compliant pipelines. We've had this out for a while, in fact, and it is a huge feature. What it allows you to do is it allows an administrator to set up to reflect your policies within your pipeline. So if you have to follow PCI or HIPAA or what have you, you can put those requirements into your pipelines in a way that the developers can't just say, I don't really want to do that today, right? So it also keeps them from having to figure out, what do I have to do, right? So it makes it super easy to be compliant for everyone. Auditors love it. And it's a way to, standardize and be consistent on the scanners, and also what you do with the results that come out of those scanners. And then, of course, I mentioned scanning. We have several different types of scanners. We've got static, dynamic, dependency scanning, container scanning, API scanning, infrastructure as code scanning. If you haven't looked at our lists in a while, be sure and check it out, because we've added a lot. But DAST is interesting because SAST is the most common things that people start with. But when we look at our post-purchase survey and why do you buy Ultimate? The vast majority buy it for the dynamic scanning. And the reason why is because we do DAST very differently. So most people have to wait until they have merged their code changes with other people's code changes and put it in a maybe a test environment or production, but put it in another environment where they can run the dynamic scan against their application. With GitLab, because we spin up an ephemeral environment during the pipeline, during the build, we can run the dynamic scan against that review app. If you're a GitLab user, you're familiar with that review app. It's a fully functioning app that reflects the code changes that you just made. And the beauty of it is it's before it's merged with anyone else's code changes. So you get that same clarity of, I made this code change, I created this error, I'm the one that's best equipped to fix it, for DAST as well. And so we are continuing to improve both the developer experience and the efficacy and speed of the DAST scanners. So be sure and look for that in our coming releases. And as always, you can find any of these upcoming issues and epics online, and please contribute to them.
Yeah, that's really interesting information. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, I mean, it's something that I feel like I need to make a t-shirt about, or something about, security is much more of a manageable problem when it's broken down into its component parts, and when it's it's brought into context with the change that actually impacted. If you only see the change after deploying, like you said, to a staging environment or maybe production, you only see the security impact then. It's so much harder to then understand, wait, what was this change and why did we make it and how did it impact security, right? All of those questions become a lot harder to answer. And so that's really exciting. So Sydney, thanks so much for joining today. Always a pleasure to see you and talk and chat about everything security and GitLab. So Thanks for coming. You're welcome back anytime you'd like to chat. All right, so that takes us through GitLab 15.1 and all the improvements, or at least the ones that Sydney and I wanted to highlight, as well as what's coming in the rest of the GitLab 15 series. And again, for the real high-level overview about where we were and where we've been and where we're going, make sure to check out the replay of our 15.0 launch event with some great speakers and some deep dives into what DevOps looks like today, 12, 15 years on from us inventing the term DevOps as an industry. And thanks as always for watching the lab today. You can find me on the internet as @O'LearyCrew most places. Twitter is where I spend most of my time, I have to be honest. So if you have an idea for a future episode or questions about anything from today's episode, feel free to reach out to me there. My DMs are wide open. You can let me know what you think. And again, the lab is released monthly, just like GitLab. And so thanks again for joining us, and I'll see you next month in the lab. Stay safe.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Techstrong TV.
All right, we're here back at Yalla DevOps Tel Aviv with the head frog, Shlomi Ben Chaim himself. Shlomi, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you. It's a pleasure to see this. Is what it is.
Amazing, right?
Amazing.
Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Honestly, I from the bottom of my heart. First of all, it's good to just be on the road. Second of all, it's good to be back in Israel, and most of all, it's good to be here with you.
Thank you.
Look, 700 people strong, sold out. I think back to Herzliya, what was it, 3 years ago, right before COVID. It was a small hotel. I think you could fit it all in one corner of this, right? Why 7? How did this become so big? What happened here?
You know, Alan, it's always amazes me how small Israel is and how big the tech community is.
Yeah.
And not just tech in terms of innovation and the startup nation, but really serious technology coming from this small spot in the Middle East, and a lot of open source activity.
Yeah.
A lot of contribution to the community. This is just, kind of justify what we think about the innovation that comes from Israel, and I'm super proud, super happy, obviously super excited to be here.
You should be, because you and not only you, but the frogs have played a big role in helping to nourish this community, right? Communities don't grow without food and water and nourishment, and be proud. Anyway, fantastic event. But let's talk, we were talking off camera before we went on stage. We've got 10 years in, 12 years, whatever, with DevOps. But the world has changed, the computing world has changed. A big theme today is IoT, the edge. You said it in your keynote, DevOps of things. Explain to our audience, what do you mean?
Yes. JFrog was born before DevOps was even a phrase, right?
Yeah.
2008, when we spoke about what we want to do, we discussed about software acceleration and automation and all type of things. And then the phrase came, and we grew together with the community. In 2015, 2016, we started to speak about liquid software and what liquid software is. It's not DevOps, it's not DevSecOps. What is the end in mind? What is the full journey that the developers need to take, seriously need to take? And it's not just your organizations adopting Kubernetes, it's about your own growth plan of where you want to be. 10 years from now as a developer. And what we identified as the foundations of Liquid Software are three cores. The first one is build. You build software, you create software. This is what the essence of DevOps deals with. Second core is security. It's not anymore something that happened at the end of the road. They expect you as a developer to own your code. Owning means also secure your code. And saying that this CVE is something that the CISO will find at the end of the road will not pass these days. And the third core, and this is the next leap of DevOps, is the edge. Take DevOps to the edge. Because at the end of the day, the deployment is what matters. Ruling this software and software supply chain all the way to the deployment on the device is actually the end in mind that developers should have. So 5 years ago, if you would say, I'm just building software, great. Today you already know that you should secure it as well. 2 years from now, you will also be responsible on the deployment on the device. This is why we are focusing on three cores in JFrog: build, secure, and edge. And that's, my friend, I think, the future of DevOps.
I think it's more than the future of DevOps. It's the future of how we're going to deploy software, right? And maybe all software deployments, DevOps, maybe not, but the edge. One thing I mentioned on stage that I think is important to this is 5G. How do you see that? Have you thought about how that kind of figures into this edge in software development?
Software supply chain in terms of security or more in terms of deployment? How do you look at it? When you think about
So here's my take on it. You can't have deployment without security. That's old thinking. Security has to be built in, a given.
Well, we have to ask ourselves, what is the one asset that becomes the primary asset from the moment of creation or from importing it from outside all the way to deployment? There is only one thing. It's the software packages, the binaries.
Yeah.
This is what you build, this is what you bring, this is what you create inside your organization, this is what you secure, because today's targets are not the organizations. These are the developers that go with the cross on their back, and they are the target of the hacker that gets in through the binaries, through those software packages to your organization. And that, at the end, is also what you deploy at the edge. So when I think about software supply chain, I'm asking myself, like, put aside all the big walls. What is the one asset that you actually run and deploy and test and build and bring? There's only one thing. It's your binaries. And the binaries requires a single source of record, one system of record that can protect and can make your organization far more efficient. So when you think about software supply chain, there are a lot of things around it, and it's a big buzz now, but you actually, what you are looking at is the binaries. Right. And you know, in JFrog, we are the binaries people, so we are
you are
obviously
the king of binaries. Yeah. It's all good. Look, here's what I think. In 3 to 5 years, because who could see out more than that, right? 3 to 5 years, it's going to be very common for, but it's going to be different, because you know what they say about technology, Shlomi, it never dies. It evolves, it works. The cloud is not going away. The data center is not going away. It'll coexist with the edge, and we'll figure out what belongs where. Much like we have multi-cloud, there'll be a new thing, let's call it multi-home, where binaries will exist in 3 dimensions, on the edge, in the cloud, on a device, at the same time, different parts. And I think that's the future of that's how we got to think of these things. It's kind of like we got to stop playing checkers and think 3-dimensional chess.
Absolutely.
Good. Hey man, it's a pleasure to see you.
Great to have you here again.
All right.
And we are very, very excited to have the community back in person.
I can't wait.
We're back.
We're back.
Stay safe.
We're live. Well, we're not live. You're watching this recorded, unfortunately, but we are in Israel for Yalla DevOps. be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Well, hey, welcome back. We had RSAC 2022, and it's Thursday. Whew, it's been a long week, but a lot of great stuff that have happened here. And one of the great things that have happened is Amit Shah, who stopped by. He is Director of Product Marketing at Dynatrace. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah, glad to have you spend some time with us. Well, we're going to dig in some data. Of course, as an analyst, I like to see the data.
Yeah.
But before we do that, tell us a little bit about yourself, and for folks that may not know Dynatrace, what Dynatrace does.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm a relative newcomer to Dynatrace. I've been here for about 2 months or so, but I have a background primarily in application development and application security. So it's really exciting to be here at RSA, the first in-person conference I've had at least for the past 2 years or so, and like everyone else. Yeah, really exciting to meet everybody, see how the industry has progressed. So in terms of what Dynatrace is and Dynatrace does, I guess we're also, a new force to be reckoned with in the security industry. And so we we come from the observability space. And so our mission is to make every digital transaction flawless and secure. And in order to be able to do that, we have a market-leading platform that can basically let you know, give you deep observability into what's happening inside your applications at any given time. And we've applied that to the application security space, and we do mainly at this point 3 things, but there will be more coming in the future. We can look into the applications and do runtime vulnerability analysis. Tell you whether or not whether any kind of vulnerabilities in open source or open source code are actually being executed, and whether they're actually what the impact would be if they were exploited, and so you should probably whether you need to fix them now or not. We do DevSecOps automation, and we recently launched the ability to do attack detection and blocking. So anytime someone launches a SQL injection attack or a command injection attack or anything like that, we're able to catch it because we're looking into how the code is being executed, and potentially block it if you so choose.
Okay, good. Love to get into that sometime too.
Yeah.
I know you had a recent report that you did around CISO research.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit. I mean, what sort of jumped out? What interesting things did the research tell you? I think you had over 1,000 CISOs or something like that?
Yeah, we had 1,300 CISOs from all around the world. Yeah. So pretty wide cross-section geographically across all industries. And in terms of what's interesting about the report, to some extent, what's interesting about it is how it kind of validated what our customers had been telling us. So the things that our customers are telling us are not just specific to our customers, but are industry-wide problems. So things like 75% of CISOs think that too many vulnerabilities are escaping into production in their custom applications. Despite the fact that more than 70% of CISOs have a multi-layered security approach, whether it's web application firewalls or source code composition or SaaS capabilities, things like that. All of those things, even no matter how much you do, it seems like things are still escaping into production. And so I think that's really the biggest takeaway. And that we need a new approach in order to be able to to solve that problem.
It makes sense. I mean, I just got through giving a talk earlier today. Sorry, folks, I keep bringing this up on our live stream, but talking about API security, the way we construct applications is completely different with microservices, cloud native, and API first kind of. I mean, that alone more or less is a microservices type architecture, demanding the need for observability and tracing and the things that you kind of come from.
Yeah.
You do have to rethink it because you can't monitor and manually, manage it. A lot of it's got to be automated, but to build it into the DevOps cycle.
Exactly.
As part of that process, you're going to manually capture things earlier and get them done because software audit creation, a lot of it is automated. So you're too late.
No, exactly. And with the software releases are happening now sometimes on more than once a day. Even if you're not doing, the crazy every 3 or 4 hour type releases, you're doing them every once a week. There's so much new code being released all the time that it's nearly impossible for developers to be able to find and fix all of the vulnerabilities in the code. Not to mention, you don't know how severe they are. I've heard literally folks have thousands upon thousands of vulnerabilities that have been identified, and all of them have high severity scores. But that's just the highest potential severity of the vulnerability. It doesn't tell you whether that vulnerability is ever actually going to be executed in your code base or not. It doesn't tell you whether the code that's being executed is near something sensitive, like sensitive customer data, or is it even accessible from the internet, things like that. And so you have to do all that you can to keep your environment clean. But in addition to that, you also need to be monitoring what's happening in your production environment. You need security observability in order to be able to do that.
Great, very good. What other interesting things kind of popped out of the data?
Yeah, so, related to that, only 25% of CISOs think that they have visibility into what's actually running in their environments.
It's not very good.
It's Yeah, and only 4% of CISOs think that they've got runtime vulnerability management capabilities. So not vulnerabilities that are present somewhere in your hosts or in your anywhere in your application, but actually being executed in runtime. And so that's a pretty big opportunity. I think to addressing that would be a pretty big opportunity for CISOs, I think.
Well, just on a personal note, I've been coming to RSA since 2003 or so.
Yeah.
And one of the anecdotes is if you're going to change jobs, do it right before RSA, RSAC, because it's a great place to come and catch up on what you're doing now.
Yeah.
As a newcomer to Dynatrace and coming to RSAC, getting back in person, what's your impression of the conference this year? What are some of the observations, takeaways, the vibe?
It's been a really great conference. I think to highlight specifically the area that I'm interested in, which is cloud application security. I went to the session that was run by the NSA, and they have like the top 3, hacker threats. Cloud security was up there. It is one of the top 3 things, after the nation state actors, that the NSA thinks we need to be looking at as an industry. So that I think was fairly illuminating for me personally. And just the general level of interest in cloud security, I think both from attendees and attending sessions related to cloud security, the number of folks that are in them, a lot of them were completely packed, the rooms. I think that it just kind of was a great. It was great to see that that this is being recognized as an actual problem.
Behind it.
A lot of energy behind it. So
very good. Well,
yeah.
Welcome. Congrats on the new role too.
Thank you.
Where can folks download that report? I'm sure that Dynatrace has some other great resources for them.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're interested in learning more, getting more insights on the report, feel free to go to dynatrace.com and download this report. We have a lot of other great insights and pretty practical things that you can do to address your runtime vulnerabilities.
Okay, Amit, great. Wonderful talking with you.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing you at next year's.
Yeah, for sure. Look forward to seeing you as well.
All right. Take care. I think we have one more interview coming up. One more, they promised me. So we're almost wrapped up here at RSAC. So we'll make sure it's a great one and get to that as soon as we can. So hang tight. Same bat station, bat channel. We'll be right back.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Inotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Inotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Inotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Inotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Techstrong TV.
I have the great pleasure today of being joined by Einat Orr. Einat is CEO and co-founder of Treeverse, when we're talking about Lake FS. Welcome. Great to have you on Techstrong TV.
Thank you for having me.
Just give us a little bit of your background. Tell us a little bit about you and tell us a little bit about Lake FS.
So by profession, I'm an algorithms developer, what used to be called back in the day, today mostly referred to as the data scientist. At some point, I started managing engineers as well, and I served as VP R&D or CTO of 4 different Israeli startup companies, the last of which was SimilarWeb, that was IPO'd last May and is a very known data company. And in 2020, I started Treeverse, the company behind Lake FS, together with my co-founder, Oz Katz.
Excellent. And what's interesting, I think, is great to hear. I love the stories around companies that are really founded around an open source project, not the other way around it. Like, let's be a company and go find an open source thing to attach ourselves to. This really was an open source project that you started as a true open source initiative.
Yes, so actually we started the open source with the company, and that is kind of a new trend. There are other companies like us, but not too many.
Mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right. The old generation of open source companies had a very successful open source project, and then they have built a company for the commercial offering. In our case, we had an idea we thought was very good around data engineering, and coming from this background, we knew that it's a basic expectation with big data professionals to have an open source tool. So from the beginning, our view was that it should be open source. That is what we would have expected as professionals in the domain. So this is what we've done ourselves for our audience.
Very cool. Interesting. Well, tell us, why start a new open source project? Why start Lake FS as compared to maybe other open source projects you probably have used in the past, I'm guessing?
Yeah. So, when I was the CTO at SimilarWeb, so I was managing an R&D team of about 200 people, and it was split pretty evenly between application developers and data engineers and data practitioners like data scientists and analysts. And it was very clear that while with application development, there were the tools and the concepts to A, provide high quality outputs, and B, to control the environment and have a very low cost of error, for example, by being able to revert a code or by being able to just move to a better version of the code when issues came up. On the other side of the same hall, there was this huge team of really brilliant data engineers, my most talented people. And they were lacking the good practices and the tools that allowed them to actually do those things, keep high quality, keep manageability, and be able to move between versions of their data in a way that would help them use the right version of the data or the best version of the data very easily. This is what I saw during that time. And this is where the idea came to provide a tool that would really help data engineers and other data professionals to adhere to software engineering best practices in a good way. And by that, I mean CI and CD that really allow high quality and reduce the cost of error.
Oh, I definitely want to explore this. I was a DBA a long time ago. We don't talk about DBAs anymore, but in going through the whole DevOps transition, it's not news to data people, data scientists, that kind of hasn't been a great fit into that kind of development process, and in some ways felt left behind. And what is it? I always wondered about this, because data is different than code in the sense that once you change, the format, the DDL, if you will, of your data structures, that's hard to go back to, unless you have temporal data, but even that across versions of schemas and things like that. So I assume those are maybe some of the challenges that you've taken on. Tell us about what you've done to try to fit into that kind of a flow, a DevOps type flow, CI/CD flow.
Yeah. So I think the reason that traditional DevOps practices should apply to data, but it's very hard to apply them on data, is because of the data. The data itself, you have code and you have data when you have intensive data applications. And the data itself is extremely challenging. And for a few reasons. And the most important one is because the data is transient. It changes over time. So you mentioned the change in schema. But also, if we look at last year's data, it is not the same as it was 2 months ago, because there are backfills. When you have inference, you have reruns. And of course, you have other aspects of additional data sets that should be consistent with the data that you already have, and put new information or new insights into data that you already had. So all those things are things that should be managed, and their manageability should be part of the day-to-day work of data professionals, because this is a problem that is intrinsic to data. Right? And when you use only software engineering tools, then you are not taking care of that aspect of the data. But we should be inspired by the excellent tools software engineers have for code, which is why we took the concept of Git and said, why won't we have version control for the data? Because when you have version control, then transiency becomes something that you can very easily conceptually manage over time. And this is what LakeFS is.
So this is version control over the data itself, not just the structure of the data and the meaning, kind of the definition behind it. It was really interesting, because you bring up a great point. I'm not a data scientist. Don't play one on TV either. And so I don't fully appreciate, all the things that happen within the analytics and the work that data scientists do. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense, that all of that work is additional knowledge, data, information, context, new information, new insights that still is relevant to the data itself that was generated a year or two ago. But you collectively want that together, right? And so you can look at, maybe here's what it was, here's what the insights, here's what these different viewpoints of it, or whatever it might be. You want to be able to kind of, look at the picture from different elements, different perspectives.
Exactly. And for that, you need to know what version of the data to look at. Because there is a single source of truth for that time. Tomorrow, the one single source of truth is a different source of truth for today. And we need to account for that aspect. So what you get when you have version control over the data is first the ability to implement CI and CD for the data itself. So data lifecycle management that actually allows you to develop in isolation, to test data before you merge it and expose it to other data users, and to automate those processes so you can ingest and deploy data only after it was tested for quality. So that is one aspect. And the other aspect is the full reproducibility. Once you work with version control, if you want to know what your data looked like a year ago, not to look at today at a year ago's data, but with the way the data looked at like a year ago, then you would have to have version control, and you would have to have a tag on the data that says, this is the way the data set, and of course, all your data sets looked like a year ago. And this is important for reproducibility, but also for any sort of auditing that you might be needing. And many industries today require that auditing. So you get a lot of use cases covered by having your data managed properly on its transient qualities.
Interesting. Is there any particular business industry or problem set that where this is best applied to? I can imagine a lot of folks, a lot of different projects, a lot of different groups can benefit from this kind of approach. But is there like an ideal use case? This is like, if you're in this world, this is where, you absolutely get the most value of taking this approach.
Yeah, so first of all, we started with object storage. So LakeFS works over S3, Google Cloud Storage, Azure Blob, of course, MinIO, and very many other object storages, but the focus is object storage. And the reason is that databases, while they also need LakeFS, have at least some guarantees for their users, while the object storage is kind of a Wild West, and it really, really needs the manageability tools urgently. So at first, we're talking about people who manage their data lakes over object storages. And then they need to have, or they would enjoy LakeFS if they have one of the following complexities: either a very big team working on the data. So working in collaboration is becoming hard. You do one thing, but someone else did another thing, and now you need to consolidate, and it becomes difficult. If you have a version control tool, then you have an automated way of doing that. So big teams, a lot of data sets. Again, you need those data sets to be consistent with one another, and you want to manage them together in a repository. So LakeFS would bring you a lot of value. Or you have simply very large amounts of data. If you're managing a lot of objects, and then you need to bring order to those large amounts of data, and LakeFS can help you with that. So we see users of all kinds. Some have small data relatively, but very big teams. Some have, and so on. Mm-hmm. And that's actually most of the users in the world. And the first need they use LakeFS for is isolation. I want to work now without anyone interrupting me and without being interrupted by others. And getting this isolation is done today by copying data. Copying petabytes of data it doesn't make any sense, because it amounts to millions, hundreds of millions of objects. So something fails, it's never the same, it's always an issue. And if you have 10 developers and you need to copy everything for everyone, it's a mess.
And just the time to do it. I mean, yes, it's fast.
Yes, exactly. It's time consuming. It's really not cost effective, because, you copy it, you never delete it, right? And no one remembers to do that. While if you use LakeFS, those are soft copies. So it's actually a metadata operation. Your costs actually reduce. Your storage costs reduce when you use LakeFS, because nothing is duplicated unless it has to be. Yes, so when you isolate, and then you get the isolation really in one atomic action. You simply type the command LakeFS branch and give it a name. And immediately in one atomic action, you have an environment for someone to develop, and they can work in isolation. So that is the simplest use case that brings tons of value. And later on, we are the basis for those quality processes and CI and CD for data. And as a last step, we're integrated into production so that we can allow a revert. Think that you introduced now 100 new data sets to your consumers. And after a few days, someone realizes there's a problem with the quality of the data. You now need to revert that lake that you have exposed to the last snapshot that is consistent on the one hand and in high quality on the other hand. If you have LakeFS, that is a very straightforward rollback action, one atomic action. It takes less than a second, and your consumers are right now using the right data. Instead of going manually, data set by data set, understanding where the problem began, make sure that it's consistent with the other data sets. This can take days.
Mm-hmm. I have to imagine, too, this would work really well for testing environments, right? Different points in time, and different insights, and adding new insights to the data. Being able to test over those generations, because like if you're a service provider, your software is being used by many customers. People may be at different places with how progressively they were using their data and how much analysis they're doing on it. But being able to, for an individual or for maybe even an application, be able to give that view, if you will, that slice of the data at that point in time.
Yeah.
Good. Well, so what does it take to get started using LakeFS?
So one option is the open source, and then you can, for a quick view of it, use what we call a playground. You can see it in our documentation, and then you can start playing with LakeFS over some generic data set that's there just to see its power. As a next step, you can install it on your laptop and take access to your data lake. So you can use it on by yourself just to see its power, but over your own data. And as a last phase, you can just install it on your cloud provider with open source. At that point, if you're not interested in managing this yourself, there is, of course, the LakeFS SaaS, where we manage LakeFS for you. You only hook to the environment and you can start using it while we supply the reliability and the upgrades and everything that is related to managing the environment.
And when someone uses the SaaS version of LakeFS, is that then running in your cloud, or is it still parts of it are still running on my accounts on my cloud providers where the data might live there too?
So everything is running on our side, but the data, and by the way, also the metadata that we create is actually saved on your account, on your S3. Now we're supporting only AWS for SaaS.
Okay.
So on your S3, so actually, you have full control over the data and the metadata we create while we provide the server and their availability. And all applications that you have can use LakeFS in order to enjoy Git-like operations when using them. So either it's Spark or any form of managed Spark, Presto, your own Python applications, and so on. You can use all of those with LakeFS and get the power of Git-like operations for your data.
Fascinating. Well, I definitely want to check this out. This is, you don't see an innovation like this too often in the data world. No offense to other data, technology vendors, but.
So, of course, any notebook that you're using, of course, you can use LakeFS with.
Mm-hmm. Great. So LakeFS, where do we find that at? What's the URL?
Yeah, so it would be lakefs.io.
Great.
And you will be
get the open source there. You could go to the SaaS eventually if you want to get to that as well.
Yes, you could, of course, join our Slack. We have an amazing community of users that are really happy to help one another.
Very good. Well, fascinating. It's a really great opportunity to kind of learn some great things that are happening in the data world, and appreciate you bringing your experience and insights into this new technology, this new open source. So folks, be sure and go check it out, lakefs.io. And there is a playground, sandbox, whatever, that you can check things out and get some hands-on experience. And then, as you said, put it on your laptop, put it on your cloud, put it on whatever environment you're developing, and experiment with it and see how you can leverage it. Thanks, Sinat, for joining us. Sinat Orr, who is CEO and founder of Treeverse and of LakeFS. So good to have you on today.
Thank you very much.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Alexis Richardson, who is the CEO for Weaveworks, and we're talking about some milestones as it relates to cloud native and what we're seeing with GitOps and all kinds of good things. Alexis, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike. Thank you.
You guys seem to be growing. The market's taking off. We passed that 1 billion container image poll benchmark or hallmark that a lot of people look at as something that says, hey, we're here to stay. And my question to you is, it seems like this has taken a long time, not GitOps per se, but the whole cloud native container shifts. And is it your perception that this is happening slower than thought, maybe on pace, or did we have some ridiculous expectations in the first place?
We definitely had ridiculous expectations in the first place. We always have ridiculous expectations in the first place. I think what's really important to set this in perspective is, at least from my seat, this is like the 90s. There is a fundamental cyclical change in the nature of the internet itself, which all the vendors are involved with. This isn't like OpenStack, where there's one vendor, Amazon, and there's a plan to kind of try to undermine them using something else. Or previously, we saw Red Hat used as a weapon against Solaris back in the day. You see these occasional battles, but now I think this is a cyclical change, a move to a different kind of internet, IPv6. Everything is connected. And, I feel like I'm closer to the end of my career than the beginning, but I feel like, the fabled internet of devices is kind of upon us soon. And, the Blade Runner world of AR, VR, and all of that stuff isn't too far away. And this means that all of the substrate is changing at the same time. The telcos are moving to 5G and the successor technologies with hyperfast wireless and telco bandwidth. The clouds are now everywhere. And the technology to run applications, which glues all this together, has been with us for a few years now in the form of containers and Kubernetes, which is a sort of iteration of Linux and app servers, really. And so for me, when people ask me, where are we? I think it's like 1997. We've just seen a couple of businesses start and do well in the new era, which give us hints of the future, but we have not yet seen mass uptake of the technologies around the edge yet. But things like cars and planes and trains will all be connected soon. And this will become very important politically as well, because of things like climate change and net zero, which I'm sure will be a big driver of consumption, as well as how we run IT too. And so I think it's a slower change than people expected. I must admit that we too were part of those who thought it would be quick. When I started Weaveworks with my friend Matthias, we thought this would be like the cloud, where Amazon appears, they change the nature of utility computing. Suddenly it's got a name. It's called the cloud. It sounds a lot cooler, and you can pay for it with a credit card, just like buying a book on the bookstore. This is kind of cool. So we start doing compute, and then suddenly things take off really quickly. And then you have new businesses like New Relic, who provide value over the top, and Heroku. We all thought that the cloud business would be a bit like the container business and cloud native. But it was held back by one key thing, which is we're bringing the enterprises with us this time, and that we're changing the infrastructure behind the firewall and in the edge, as well as in the cloud. So that slows things down by a factor of, 3, 4, or 5. And that's why I think we're still in the early hills of a big change.
It seems like enterprises always move slower than people anticipate. And even as we move along here and we start building out more of these microservices, container-based, cloud-native applications, the bulk of what they're running is going to be legacy for a while. So what's your sense of how long this transition is going to play out for?
I think that we've got at least 2 more decades of the transition to see it through in its fullest. I think the next 10 years is going to be going over the hump, so to speak, where we start to attach the legacy apps. And I think we'll see that in 2 stages. So we're in stage 1 right now, where all the cloud vendors and other folks have moved behind the firewall now with enterprise and hybrid offerings based on tools like Cloud Native and Kubernetes. And you'll hear Cloud Native more and more referring to these hybrid deployments, and not only to containers and Kubernetes, but other things like PaaS and serverless in that context. This will take a few years, but then what we'll see is we'll start to see a way for actual legacy applications to much more efficiently move into an automated data center or into a public cloud where they will run until they're thrown away. And I think the technology shift that we're seeing now, and Weaveworks is part of this actually, is through the ability to attach non-containerized workloads to Kubernetes. So what we found is that Kubernetes is a great tool for doing orchestration and management as infrastructure. You don't necessarily want to see all of it if you're a developer, but as infrastructure, it's fantastic for this. If we could attach legacy apps, databases, API gateways, and all this stuff that people have been building for the last 15 or 20 years onto Kubernetes, then we could maybe use Kubernetes to manage that stuff for us. which would mean things like checking that the app is available, and if it isn't, waking up a spare copy, active passive failover, being able to root the app if it's moved. And these are really basic functions, but for some reason they've been quite hard to do in the past using proprietary virtualization technologies. So have some combination of Kubernetes, containers, lightweight virtual machines may show us a way to bring these legacy applications into the automated and managed future. And I think that's the second phase. After that, I think it will stop and we'll see, the consequences in a future decade of whatever that gets us to.
All right, so some convergence is coming our way. What exactly, so you have accomplished some things in the last year and seen some rapid growth. So where do you think, as you look at those numbers, where are we going to be 6 months and a year from now? And what's your sense of what is the pace we're on?
I think we're very much at the crossing the chasm to the mass market stage for most of these technologies now. All of the big acquisitions in Kubernetes that happened a couple of years ago have had time to settle in. All of the vendors are offering that as part of their services. If every enterprise now has a pick and choose of a commodity orchestrator offering, yes, there are still complexities, but now we're actually focused on shipping the applications. And the transition I'm seeing is people going from a couple of apps done by hand to automated application management on top using GitOps. And that's why we've seen 2 billion downloads of Flux, for example. And, traditional analysts, firms like Gartner, are starting to talk more about GitOps than ever before because their enterprise customers are asking them for it. We're also seeing it embedded into Microsoft's platform with the Weaveworks and Flux, and Azure launched GA with GitOps earlier in the year. Amazon is doing similar things and other big vendors too. So I think that our role in this continues to be to help customers deploy applications to their venue of choice, multi-cloud or hybrid cloud. You choose your architecture. We'll help you roll it out and automate the management using GitOps. Some new changes for us. We did this acquisition. I think last time we spoke about acquiring Magalix. That offering now is fully part of our enterprise product. So policy as code, or automated compliance, if you will, can now be part of this. This is really important for these enterprises. Very few CIOs want every single thing to be automated without also having checks and balances, either manual or programmatic. And that's now part of the standard stack. Then also, as I mentioned, we're seeing people asking, well, hey, what about not just containers? And no enterprise has only containerized apps. So they're all saying, I've got these virtual machines, I've got bare metal, I've got edge deployments, I've got data centers. Can you bring all of this under one sort of management theme? And the answer is yes. With Kubernetes and GitOps, we have an operating model that can bring all these things into one place. And that's what Weaveworks product will also give you today. So this is great news, I think.
Do you think at some point, I'm not sure how many people actually know what GitOps means, so maybe you might want to explain that a little bit, but also as part of this, do you think the ultimate success is maybe when we don't use the word GitOps because it's just the way everybody kind of normally does things?
Absolutely. I think that GitOps, like Kubernetes, will become part of the very standard jargon that's so commonplace that people don't talk about it, along with cloud native as well. So that's for sure. And GitOps today basically means automated management based on artifacts that's stored in Git and image repositories like Docker Hub, for example. These are places where you store immutable information about variable systems like data centers, apps, stacks, and clusters. And the way that you manage them in GitOps is using agents which manage them for you remotely and securely without you having to touch them at any scale you like. And that is a beautiful thing because it means that we can generate a lot more infrastructure and manage it without increasing the headcount of our operation and while reducing errors because it's done much more programmatically. And I think that, to your point, yes, I'm already seeing people starting to talk about what you can do with GitOps rather than GitOps itself. So platform, the next generation of application platform, the next generation of serverless, we're seeing people bringing out offerings which are GitOps managed. And when you look at the details of their marketing and their websites, GitOps is mentioned, but in the small print, because it's an information about how it is done. It's a checkbox rather than a super interesting new thing about about what you're getting. So I agree with you 100%.
What do you think so far has been the challenge about making the transition to cloud native microservices, GitOps, whatever you want to kind of combine together to kind of make all that happen? But it seems like organizations are still finding it a little bit difficulty, and it goes beyond Kubernetes itself. It seems like they're struggling with processes and how they bring all that together. So what are you hearing from folks?
So many things. It's complicated. There's too many moving parts. We lack the skills. We don't have a plan. What's the operating model? How to make it secure? Those are the continual themes. I think it's not a overnight change to fix those. What I've seen is continuous improvement over the last 5 years, and I see that continuing. Just as in the 90s, I remember people building their own servers, and then they built their own Linux, and then they got Linux from a vendor, and then suddenly there was only one vendor. You know, it's an evolution. I think also that there's a fundamental problem here, which is, if I talk about cloud native, and I mean in the cloud, then there's an alternative, which is just to use the existing cloud services. Whereas if I talk about in the enterprise, then there may be no alternative, but I'm already in this kind of world of pain where everything is unique. It's like digging down millions of layers of sediment through the years to get to the bottom of different pieces of IT, and very hard to integrate things and make new systems out of old ones. So you've got two fundamental objections to going cloud native. In the public cloud, it's like, why do I need to do this if I can do it already using virtual machines and services from the vendor? And the other is, this is really hard. I don't want to make my life any harder by introducing more things. And so I think that what's happened is we've seen it push through the gaps. So new application classes of machine learning, especially, I'm now seeing a lot of movement around sustainable computing and also FinOps, the automated management by financial metrics of your actual stack so that you're always optimizing for cost, rather than, say, CPU size or something like that, or uptime. And FinOps, and if you like, GreenOps, are both things we can do with GitOps, because they're systems that are automating the management of a system towards a specified goal. And everybody's going to have sustainable computing very soon. And that's going to drive adoption too. So the point is, you've got to have a business reason that's bigger than the pain point. Now, that's why, for example, with the public cloud, a lot of the adopters have been big digital shops that have highly skilled staff. And in the enterprise, it's been people like banks who are constantly renewing their IT anyway. But I think for the majority, we've got to have a slightly simpler way of adopting it. And we're seeing that incrementally.
So as you look out a year from now, where are we going to be? Will we have crossed that chasm and achieved that level of simplicity? And if so, what ultimately will drive that?
I think in a year's time, we're all going to be talking about how much things cost, a lot. And we're going to be talking not only about money cost, but also heat cost. And we're going to be worrying a lot more about where things are running and how they're managed by different people based on geopolitical and other non-political concerns about what the local cost of carbon is, for example. All of these things are going to be forced upon us by the macroeconomic climate of volatile shares, volatile bonds, inflation, etc. I mean, some of these factors may blow over a bit, but I think we're kind of in a new regime now. So I think that then you have to ask, what will drive consumption in a world of low cost? And I think that open source is going to be a huge factor, because people find that it's great to not have to pay for something until you've decided you're actually going to use it. That's really appealing. I think anyone who can offer very low-cost services in the cloud that are useful will equally do very well. Or people who have freemium business models, which are cheap at one end and only grow expensive if you have serious consumption. All of that is good. So I think that we'll continue to see growth of the cloud. I think that we'll see a lot of developer offerings coming through, which are aimed at joining together the benefits of open source and SaaS with some of these very powerful infrastructure engines like Kubernetes and GitOps. Weaveworks will certainly be part of that second group as we bring out more simplified platforms for application developers. And there'll be other things too, but I think those will be big factors, and cost will be the factor that drives all of it.
Yeah. Well, there's just no way that IT exists in a vacuum, right? So all these things that are affecting our daily lives, whether it's inflation or somebody having a fight with somebody else in a country far, far away, eventually come home to roost. Hey, Alexis, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Mike. Pleasure.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Paul Caiazzo, who is a advisor to Advertium, and we're talking about what's going on with the whole Ukraine-Russia cybersecurity conflict. Paul, welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for the time, Mike.
So early on, we were supposed to be by now having the equivalent of a cybersecurity nuclear winter, and it doesn't seem that that's quite what has happened, but there's definitely a lot of conflict still going on. So why didn't this escalate beyond what we thought it was going to be, and where are we now?
Well, that's a really good question. I think actually it's still May, so I wouldn't say that we're behind the worst potential outcome here. But I think geopolitically, if you look at what's happening between Russia and NATO, and the rest of the world, there's certainly a chilling effect from the perspective of Russia, from an aggressor standpoint, on what they may expect in terms of retaliation to spilling beyond Ukraine's borders. And so I think that's primarily why we're seeing the activity stay within Russia and Ukraine. We have seen, however, an escalation between those two actors, both from Russia taking a more concerted approach towards disrupting Ukraine's military efforts, as well as Ukraine taking a defensive stance and bringing some of their own cyber weaponry to bear against the Russian aggressors. So it's been interesting to follow, certainly from a cyber professional's perspective, as you see kind of the complexion of modern warfare playing out on the battlefield.
And where do you fit in this conversation? And what are you hearing from other cybersecurity professionals and your customers about what are they doing to respond, if anything?
Well, I think there's several ways to look at that. First off, what Advertium does is provide 24/7 monitoring for threats and incident response when those threats are discovered. So, beyond anything else, we must be informed in terms of what adversaries are deploying on the cyber battlefield throughout the world. And so we've had to stay in very close touch with respect to what new weapons Russia's developed and brought to bear. Some of those include Hermetic Wiper, Ghost Wiper, a bunch of new ransomware that Russia developed and released earlier in the year, specifically against Ukraine. So ensuring our customers feel confident that they're protected against these new approaches by Russia in the event that they should spill over. And there's really good reason to be concerned about that specific case. You don't need to look too far back in time to 2017 to the NotPetya incident, which was actually, I think, the most damaging cybersecurity incident in history to date, which was also a situation where Russia brought a offensive capability to bear against Ukraine, which looked like a ransomware attack, but in reality, it was just simply a destructive attack that completely crippled, not just Ukraine, but many, many organizations around the world. I think Maersk, the large multinational global shipping company, lost almost $1 billion in responding to the NotPetya incident. And they certainly weren't the target of it, but they certainly felt the effects as well. So it's always good practice just to be aware of what potential outcomes could be in the event that, mistakes happen or, an attack spills over its intended target base.
Is one of the downstream impacts of all this is that there will be a rush by nation states to advance their state of the art of their attacks, especially in the case of Russia and also in the case of Ukraine. And will that therefore then eventually people will study those tactics and start using them by, your average everyday cyber criminal, and the whole state of the offensive weapons will increase?
Absolutely, yes. So it is 100% an arms race. You see not just the nation states sort of developing new capabilities against one another. We certainly do the same thing here in the United States. We have a very well regarded, at least from a capability standpoint, offensive capability within our nation's national security apparatus, probably the best in the world. And so we continuously develop new things. Our adversaries do the same. So when you see that sort of capability developing on a global scale, it does spill down into the cybercrime ecosystems, probably nowhere more than Russia, actually, simply because Russia cybercrime is not just sort of taken a blind eye and looked at without much regard, but in some cases is actually quite sponsored by government activity. And you can see traces of Russia's intelligence apparatus within some of the ransomware as a service ecosystems. So tooling that is developed for the purposes of Russia's nation state adversarial capability, you do see deployed in cybercrime operations as well. I think some of that could probably be tied back to sanctions. So if the Russian economy has no legitimate ability to fund itself with international funds, why not illegitimate ways of funding itself through things like ransomware? That's a little bit of speculation, but it doesn't seem like too far a bridge. And I would expect similar activity to occur in other sanctioned countries. So North Korea, they're widely regarded as one of the most capable cybersecurity adversaries on the planet, and they are routinely accredited with the theft of cryptocurrencies directly. And some of their capabilities that is brought to bear again through some of their APT groups, like the Lazarus Group, you definitely see filtering down into cybercrime ecosystems as well. Iran's in a similar boat, and you see other sanctioned areas of the world trying to develop capabilities similar to that. So Venezuela is another one that has an advancing cyber capability, but there's definitely a lot of interlinkage between cybercrime and just nation state activity at large.
Do a lot of those nation states try to make it look like somebody else did it? And is that part of the hard challenge of figuring out who did what to whom? Because everybody's getting pretty good at spoofing each other.
Yeah, that's a really, really insightful question. And it's absolutely the case that attribution is very, very difficult. It's really only the domain of the intelligence community and military to really, truly attribute to a specific actor. There are intelligence organizations in the private sector that do a lot of work around attribution, but even that, they are loath or slow to accredit any given attack to a single nation state or individual threat group because it's dangerous to make those attribution claims. To your point, if I were China, let's say, and I wanted to create a little bit of additional tension in this situation between Russia and the West, wouldn't it be potentially an interesting strategy to deploy some of my own Chinese capabilities against a Western interests, making it look like it was Russia? And certainly that's possible to do. Certainly it's happened before. That sort of false flag type of attack is something that we've seen happen in the past. And in situations like this, where there, again, geopolitical tensions are so high, it would be in the interest of a group, to, again, make it look like one of their competitors on the global scale was actually responsible for attack that they weren't. They gain the benefit of potential reaping the rewards of whatever attack they directly impacted, but then also the adjacent benefits from a geopolitical diplomatic standpoint as well, which are super interesting. Definitely happens.
We also saw the U.S. and its allies launch this SHIELD program, and they were inviting people to participate in that. Is that working? Are we getting better defenses as a whole, or are too many organizations kind of still out on their own and not really understanding how much risk they have?
Well, I think at large, the cybersecurity industry doesn't do as good a job at sharing information as it could. And that's one of, I think, the fundamental problems that are really endemic to the entire issue with cybersecurity in general, is that each individual organization generally has to learn how to defend themselves against some specific threat on their own, or has to develop their own protection mechanism on their own and deploy it for themselves. If information were more broadly shared, like what you see happening with both CISA, the Cybersecurity Information Security Agency, and also NSA's Collective Defense Program, the more participation there is in that with some prescribed outcomes, I think the better. Because at the end of the day, again, if there are, if there's information to be gleaned from an attack that can be the high tide that rises all ships and provide better collective defense for other organizations. I personally believe it's in the nation's national security interest to promote that sort of activity. But one thing I've observed is that if you look at the vendor ecosystem, let's take some of the major SIM or EDR vendors or other preventive control vendors. Some of their competitive advantage is their content, right? So if they know more, then they're potentially more competitive against their vendor competitors. But that knowledge in and of itself could be, again, of national security interest. And so if that's how the industry views this information, it's not going to move towards a more open sharing sort of model. And I think that will inhibit some of our ability to defend ourselves. So I think we need to be better at that, both sharing intelligence, like IOCs, IP addresses, hashes, domain names, things like that. Actually, we've gotten better as an industry at sharing information like that. But the undercurrent there is that intelligence is somewhat less valuable, because an IP address, it's very, very easy for a nation state actor, even a cyber criminal, to spin up new infrastructure with new IP addresses, new hashes, new domains. That's all very easy. What's more difficult for them to change is their behaviors. And it takes a more concerted researcher to better understand adversarial behavior. And then there's not really an existing framework for sharing that information broadly, like what you might see within intelligence sharing that relates to IP addresses, things like that. So advancements there would be a big benefit to the industry. And I think the SHIELD program is a step in the right direction, but it requires more broad participation and really, in my opinion, more of an open mindset with respect to what kind of information can be shared, should be shared, needs to be shared when there are critical incidents that happen.
Are the bad guys getting better at sharing? It seems like they share all the time.
Absolutely, they are. And that's one of the other big challenges within this industry. So, we're fortunate as an industry in that we've got a bad guy, we've got an adversary that we can, rally against, because we do have common enemies in many cases. But our adversaries are definitely very good at working together. I think the ransomware as a service ecosystem probably is a great testament to that, where there's a handful of groups that there's a lot of overlap between the participants in each of those groups that might be named, that you might have heard of. Black Basta is a recent one, our Evil, Conti, the big names. There are operators within each of those groups that kind of float between them. And then there's an affiliate community that's just underneath them. And those affiliates are not tethered to one of those ransomware organizations. They can work with any of them, and many of them do. And so when there's that level of sharing of talent amongst these cyber criminal ecosystems, then their outcomes are better from their perspective. So they are more successful because they share more talent, they share more research, they share tooling in a lot of cases as well, with again, the tacit underwriting of a government that doesn't seem to care that these groups work together in support of, again, disrupting Western interests. So you've got collaboration at the cyber criminal operator level. You've got collaboration with a government that, again, may benefit from that illicit activity. And that sort of collaboration kind of doesn't exist at the same level on the good guys' side. So that's a problem that, again, we definitely have to solve.
We've seen a lot of quote unquote volunteers that are coming to the aid of Ukraine. There's probably volunteers coming to the aid of Russia here as well. Is that a good thing? Because, last time I checked, eventually mercenaries got to go find something else to do after the war's over. So are we kind of creating this primordial soup of something that may bite us in ways we don't imagine in the future?
I think we are. I think Ukraine's IT army is playing a little bit of a dangerous game personally, and any hacktivist that gets involved in a situation like that is, potentially playing with fire. And I say that because, when you're operating against a nation state, nation states do not have some of the restrictions, especially, again, this nation's adversaries. Those sort of governments don't have the same set of restrictions that we might. And so when you look at some of the retaliatory activity that Russia has taken against their dissenters, even internally, it includes death. And so a hacktivist taking action against Russia needs to think very carefully the consequence that they're willing to accept for both themselves and then their family in the event that their activity were to be attributable. Because certainly they do not take kindly. Russia does not take kindly for people kind of getting in their business. And this is a situation where an individual who frankly has no concept of exactly what they're up against with respect to Russia's not just cyber capability, but kinetic capability to take action in real life. They're potentially not taking that into account when they're doing their thing. That's behind the anonymity that the internet provides. That anonymity might not be as bulletproof as one might think. And I'd personally be quite careful about bringing offensive capabilities to bear against a nation state. In the United States, it's illegal to do, even if you're doing that against, again, our nation's adversaries. It's a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and so that again has to be considered when anybody's thinking about doing this sort of thing. Not even to mention sort of the other stuff that you talked about is what happens when these operations are over. Perhaps there's some skills that were learned in the process of operating in one of these hacktivist groups that could be brought to bear for legitimate purposes. Red teaming or penetration testing, or even just simply better defending an organization. Hands-on skill certainly helps with that. But again, the consequences there are very, very high. And I'm not sure that risk analysis has been completed by everybody participating there.
It seems like, to me at least, that the biggest threat here is just collateral damage. A lot of these attacks that get launched between Russia and Ukraine aren't contained by a physical border. So do organizations need to kind of monitor what's going on here simply because there are new attacks being launched? They may not be aimed at them directly, but they sure as heck can land on their system. So, how much or how closely should they be paying attention to what's going on here?
Yeah, I think there's that aspect of it. Just the interconnectedness of systems also is something to think about, where an attack against someone that happens to, let's say, a Ukrainian business that happens to have a business relationship with another European counterpart. A crippling incident, within that Ukrainian business could ultimately become, again, an incident for that partnered or allied organization. And I think what we're really speaking to there is just supply chain, and we're seeing that at the global level right now, anyway. So, with so much activity in Ukraine crippling Ukraine's businesses, especially the agricultural businesses, it's very difficult for the rest of the country to, or the rest of the world to continue with food supplies in the same way that they might have had prior. Similarly, within Russia, Russia gas and oil supplied much of Europe with its energy, and so these incidents, these cyber incidents that are attacking some of those organizations, perpetrated by Ukraine, could be impacting supply of oil and gas to the rest of the world as well. So it's not just necessarily the cyber impacts of this have to be thought through as it relates to crossing borders or crossing organizational boundaries, but it's the real world impact of supply chain restrictions, supply chain issues that will be felt, that are currently being felt, and that doesn't just apply to this conflict either. That would apply to any relationship, any business relationship that one might have. If you look at some ransomware incidents that have happened in the past, we've seen an organization be targeted by ransomware, be ransomed, be crippled in the process, and then ultimately their partners that might surround them as part of how they go to market have felt the effect of that as well, and have had negative financial impact as well on them that results in litigation. So again, there's more to it than just the cyber impacts. There's always going to be a real world sort of impact that's felt by individuals like you and I in terms of rising costs or in terms of just inability to access goods, and that also has significant impacts on the businesses that support us.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times I still see organizations that are trying to fight the fight themselves. They're relying on their internal IT or cybersecurity staffs. Is that feasible in this day and age, or is it just a recipe for eventual failure because we've entered some new phase where you just really can't go it alone?
So I think it depends upon the size and maturity of the business, and also probably what industry they operate within. Certainly, some of the very large financial institutions that we work with have a high degree of capability internally, but they probably also have $100 million security budget. Very few organizations can, claim that level of investment into cybersecurity alone, not even just technology, right? So if you're a smaller organization, and by smaller, I mean anybody but the absolute biggest, you probably need to have a network of support that's either providing you a service or helping you make the right choices in terms of how to manage risk within your organization. I don't think it's really possible for anyone to go it alone. And even that very large financial institution example that I gave you, I'm talking to them specifically about how to solve some, very specific operational issues that they happen to have. And so even the most well-funded organizations in the world realize that they've got to have outside help. Same goes for our nation's, intelligence community. There's a lot of partners that support them from the private sector, and that would go for any other industry as well. So yes, I would say anyone that has anything to lose, which everyone does, needs to consider whether their internal staff is sufficiently not just capable, not just trained, but enabled. Have we given them the right budget? Have we given them the right remit? Do they have the charter to be empowered to actually protect the organization? And if they don't, then some different questions have to be answered with respect to: do we need to increase funding? Do we need to bring in better providers or an outsourced partner that might help us solve this that is expert in this? Because frequently, when an organization tries to do some of this stuff themselves internally, they'll have generalists who have a broad IT background, which is great. You need to have a broad perspective in terms of technology, but maybe lack the specific cybersecurity expertise or just seat time and lack again some of that unique capability or mindset that comes from having had run incidents, having had dealt with incident response and threat hunting. It's a very different sort of scenario than managing an outage in sort of your general IT shop. Takes like I said, experience and seat time and muscle memory, and generally you don't get that without having had gone through the trenches a few times, and typically an internally staffed organization like that hasn't done it.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. Might be time to circle those wagons. Hey, Paul, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure, Mike. Glad to be here.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some brilliant interviews with Alan and Mitch at RSA, as well as another great episode of GitLab's The Lab. We also had some really insightful editions of View with Vizard. We'll be back again tomorrow, so please join us for that. Once again, thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you again. Stay strong, Techstrong.